these worksheets are super helpful, but only if you get them all right, right? If you didn't get them right, let me know. We'll work it out so I can give you some strategies for the test tomorrow. Anybody? Danielle? 5. Or do you have your assignment from yesterday out? Okay. So 5 says 3x squared minus 18x equals 120. So we learned two different ways to solve these quadratic equations by factoring. Solve quadratic equations. One was by factoring, and one was using the square root. We said that if there's a squared term and a constant, we're going to use the square root. If there's a trinomial or a binomial that doesn't have a constant in it, then we probably are going to have to factor and then set the factors equal to 0. This one, 3x squared minus 18x equals 120. It has 3 terms. So we are going to want to get them all on one side and then factor. Does that make sense, Danielle? All right. So I think it was 3x squared plus 18x equals 20. Is that right? Minus 18x. Minus 18x. Okay. So we want to get everything on the same side. We're going to move the 20. Yes? 120. Thank you. So we're going to move the 120. We're going to subtract 120 from both sides. 3x squared minus 18x minus 120 equals 0. So far, so good, Danielle? All right, so before we factor, we always look and see if there's a common factor in all the terms. Is there a common factor in all 3 of those terms? What do you think? Is there a common factor there? What did you say, Lee? What you did say that. I heard somebody say it. Keishawn said 3. So look at those 3, the 2 coefficients and the constant, Danielle. 3 is a factor of itself. 3 is a factor of 18 because 6 times 3 is 18. And 3 is a factor of 120 because 3 times 40 is 120. Make sense? So we're going to factor that out. If we factor out a greatest common factor that's not a variable to solve an equation, then we don't have to mess with it once we factor it out. So we can forget about this 3 now. Did I make a mistake here? Let's make sure. 3 times x squared is 3x squared. 3 times negative 6x is negative 18x. And 3 times negative 40 is negative 120. So far, so good? 0. So this is the part I'm factoring now. X squared minus 6x minus 40 equals 0. If this was a variable, or 3x, or just x, we'd have to count that as one of our factors and set it equal to 0 to solve. But since there's not a variable, we can ignore that now. So this is a trinomial with a coefficient of 1. We learned a couple units back that if it's factorable into 2 binomials. What goes in these first spots here, Danielle? Not x squared, right? We need something times something to get x squared. Yes, x times x equals x squared. What we need to know is what goes here. So this is where we use our x. Do you remember what we put in the x? Multiply to get negative 40 and add to get what? What do you think? Anybody help her? Negative 6. Okay? So if we have this trinomial, we want 2 factors that equal negative 40, but that add up to negative 6. Okay? Does that make sense? So looking at factors of 40, Danielle, Negative 40. Are my signs going to be positive, positive, negative, negative, or positive and negative? If I do a negative times a negative, what do I get? Yes. If I do a positive times a positive, what do I get? Yep. What if I do a negative times a positive, what do I get? Get a negative. So that's all we need. One positive, one negative. So 1 times 40, if one is positive and one is negative, 1 minus 40 is 30, negative 39, or vice versa, positive 39. That's no help. 2 times 20 gives us 40, but that's a difference of 18, and I need a difference of 6, negative 6. 3 is not a factor, but 4 and 10 is. If I multiply 4 times 10, I get negative 40. If I subtract 4 minus 10, I get negative 6, and that's what I need. Right, Danielle? Okay. So that means the 4 is positive and the 10 is negative. So plus 4, negative 10. Plus 4, minus 10. Does that make sense? Now what do we do? Sorry? I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Say it again? Oh. So I'm going to give you a hint. We learned 2 ways to solve these quadratic equations, solved by factoring or solved by taking the square root. We factored here, right? So after we factor, what do we do with the factors? Okay, Sean's helping me. So set them equal to 0. So one factor is x plus 4. One factor is x minus 10. We have to set each of them equal to 0 and solve that simple equation. To solve this equation, to get x by itself, I subtract 4. And so I know one of my solutions is negative 4. To get x by itself on this equation, I need to add 10. That's how I get this to 0. And so now I know that x is equal to positive 10. So my solution for number 5 are negative 4 and positive 10. We write it in set notation. Anybody else have a question on any of them? Akira? 20. Okay, let's do 20. So this was 5, and we're going to do 20. If you are working on your Chromebook and you want to follow along with us now, you can do that. Get yesterday's worksheet out, and you can be copying down the problems we're working on. Either, if you're not doing that, you need to be working on Alex. Akira, would you mind reading me that problem? Okay, I will tell you there's 2 ways to do this one. Okay, what way did you try it? Okay. Well then I'm going to show you the other way. Okay? You can do it that way. So when you subtracted 10, you had 9 times 6 and 54. Is that 54? Well, if you subtract 10 here, right, you're going to get 9 squared plus 24x plus 6, right? So 9 times 6 is 54. That's your middle term. Oh, okay. 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 Well, let's try it the other way then. I think there's a way to do that. But let's try this one. What do you notice about this trinomial, Akira? Is this a perfect square? Is this a perfect square? Okay. What's the square root of the first one? 3. What's the square root of the second one? And if we double it, we get 24x. So that makes this a what? Perfect square trinomial, which factors into a binomial squared. Right? So what's that factor going to be? Okay. So the square root of this you said was 3x. The square root of this you said was 4, and it's a plus 4. So you and I talked about this, and you're right. You can use the same strategy, but one of your benchmarks is to be able to solve these multiple ways, right? So for some people, I'm really happy if they can solve them either way. But you did a perfect formula. So you need to push yourself now to try all the strategies a little bit, at least on the homework. If you're not comfortable in the test, then do it the way you're comfortable in the test, right? But on the homework, you want to push yourself a little bit more. Does that make sense? So now all I have to do is take the square root of this side and the square root of this side. What's the square root of the left side? That's exactly right. And then the square root of 10 is going to be a positive, negative. Would you find the square root of 10 for me on your calculator? Okay, so we said we're going to round to the hundredths place if we're given an approximate answer. So we're going to add and subtract 3.16. Does that make sense? So now we have two equations, because 3x plus 4 is equal to two different numbers, right? It's going to be equal to a positive 3.16 and a negative 3.16. Okay? And we're going to subtract 4. 3x equals negative 0.84. Divide both sides by 3. And if I remember from first period, there's negative 0.28. Say it again. Can you do it for me? 0.84 divided by 3. Yes, negative 0.28. Okay. So here we're going to subtract 4 again. So now we have 3x equals negative 7.16. Now what are you going to do? And so now I also can't remember what that is. You do that for me. 2.38. What comes after the 8? Yes, so that's going to be 2.39. Right? So when we're doing that, we need a little bit more than blah, blah, blah. We need 2.386, blah, blah, blah. That's what we look at if it's around, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. If you want, you and I come up and we'll do it your way together later, okay? But remember, you're practicing all the strategies, then use the one you're most comfortable with on the test, okay? Anybody else have a question on any of the problems from yesterday's review worksheet? Remember, test tomorrow is going to be very, very similar to the review worksheet that was due today. Hey, Sean, do you have any questions? Lee, any questions? Zion? Brandon? Shakira? Okay, which one? 9? Okay, we're going to do number 9. Will you read it to me again? 7 plus 6x? Okay. This is a positive square term. I like my square term on the left. I'm going to flop everything around. So I'm going to do 10x plus 7 plus 2x squared equals 7 plus 6x. Does that make sense, Kara? Doesn't really matter. We could do it that way, but a lot of kids like to keep everything on the left, right? So now we have some terms with a constant here and a constant here. An x term here and an x term here. So we need to get everything together, right? So what do you want to do first? Okay, minus 7 on both sides is going to leave me 10x plus 2x squared equals 6x. Mrs. Zimmerman. Well, okay, well, I wasn't in the senior meeting, so I don't know. I don't know if they took roll there. Some kids were already excused, so I don't really, she didn't come to me, I'll tell you that. She didn't come to me first, so I can't say if she was at the senior meeting or not. Okay. Thanks, bye. Okay. So now what should we do, Akira? Let's try to fix that from our side, that's right. I know when I do this, I'm going to rearrange a little bit because I want my x squared term first. That's how I like it. So when I rewrite this, I know 10x minus 6x is 4x. That's a positive 4x. And I'm going to put my 2x squared in front of it. That makes sense, Akira? And it's equal to 0. Okay. So now I have a binomial, but they both have an x. And they both have another common factor. What's the common factor of both terms now, Akira? Yep. 2x. So what is that other factor going to be in here? X minus 2, because 2x times x is 2x squared, and 2x minus 2 is 4x. That's negative. So now we have factors. What do we do from here? Okay, now what? Perfect. And we're going to put our answer in set notation. Oh. Maybe I have a typo. No one mentioned it from first period. Now you read it right, Mom. I think there's a typo. So you had it right. I'm going to double check. But let's see if I can save that. All right, does anybody else have any questions on yesterday's review worksheet? So we have 15, 17 minutes left. Look through your worksheet. I don't mind working a problem or two. And remember, if you didn't know how to do a problem and we worked it together, you should always go back and work that problem later and make sure that you understand it on your own. Kendall, no questions on anything from yesterday? Janicia, no questions? Danielle, you can't sleep, honey. Sit up. Danielle, you need to go to the clinic? You feeling bad? Okay, well, you got to sit up. Did you hear me? You got to sit up. Go ahead. Thank you so much. So I guess if no one else has any questions from yesterday, you guys can start working on today's worksheet. Remember, test tomorrow. And if you need help, let me know. You got to be actively working on it or working on Alex. If you're not sure how to do something, come sit with me. We'll work some problems together.